Hi everyone, it's Professor Todd here with a video on collaborative grading, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through what it is and how I use it in my class. To start with, collaborative grading is a process of assessment where the student and the professor collaborate together to determine the grade that the student earns in the class. So the student is asked to self-reflect throughout the semester and assess their performance in the class, while the instructor provides feedback and collaborates with the student to help them fulfill both the objectives and outcomes of the course, as well as the learning goals the student set for themselves. So at the beginning of the semester, I provide students with the objectives and outcomes for the course, along with a rubric for how to determine whether or not they are fulfilling the objectives and outcomes of the course. So these objectives and outcomes are set both by the university and by myself. Then the students will also set their own learning goals for the course. That is what they hope to accomplish, what they would like to learn, and what they would like to take away from the class when they're finished. And then they're responsible for sort of determining how those learning goals will be met throughout the semester. So that's the beginning of the collaboration process. I'm setting the objectives and outcomes, and the students are setting their learning goals. Throughout the semester, the students will self-reflect on how they are meeting the objectives and outcomes and also meeting their learning goals. So periodically, I'll ask them to write a self-reflection on their progress in the class, like at midterm and at final. And also for each assignment or assignment category, they'll be asked to reflect on how that assignment is meeting the objectives and outcomes and learning goals. So that is really sort of their way of assessing their progress, and they will assign themselves a grade along with that assessment. So I believe I've earned a B on this assignment, and here's why. And typically, I take the grade that they give themselves, unless I think that it's wildly different from what the expectations are for that assignment. I find that most of the time students know what they've earned on an assignment if they really are reflective about it. So it asks them not only to just assign themselves a grade, but really reflect on how that assignment meets the objectives and outcomes. Then at the end of the semester, they'll write a final reflective piece over the entire semester. When they do those self-assessments, they're not done in a vacuum and they're not done in the dark. I'm there providing feedback and guidance as well. In the collaborative grading classroom, the professor is still the expert, and that expertise is used not only through the teaching that occurs, but also through the guidance in the collaborative process. So I'll write feedback on the assignment as they're drafting and as they're working on it. I'll provide feedback throughout the semester on their class participation or discussion boards and tell them what they need to be doing to improve their performance. So the learning is never finished. It's constantly ongoing, and students are constantly being asked and pushed to do a little bit more and really expand their knowledge. So that's one of the benefits of the collaborative grading process, is that it focuses on the process rather than the product. It really asks students to think about the process of their learning throughout the entire semester. Another benefit of collaborative grading over traditional grading is that it gives the students the ownership back. It makes them active participants rather than passive recipients of the class, and of the learning. So they become the owners of their education. They really have their assessment portion of their education in their hands. So that really, I think, gets students more involved, and it takes some of the mystery away from grading. It also makes the grading process more equitable in that sometimes traditional parameters of grading or traditional parameters of measuring learning can be somewhat biased and can be very narrow. And so this really allows students more flexibility and creativity in demonstrating how they learn in the class. I allow students, for instance, in any category, to kind of use inventive ways and really encourage them to use inventive ways to respond to or to demonstrate their learning. For instance, in discussion boards, they can do video posts instead of written posts. Or, if there were in a final project, they have a variety of different multimodal options to present their learning. So as long as they are demonstrating that they have successfully met the objectives and outcomes of the course and that they have fulfilled their own learning goals, I'm pretty flexible in how that can be demonstrated. This means that the students have to be a little bit more thoughtful, which I think is better. It requires them to really understand what it is the course is asking from them and how they are able to fulfill those expectations. So it really makes students more involved and more reflective in their learning. So to me, collaborative grading is kind of a great way to make learning more student-centered and more self-reflective. It's also rigorous. Collaborative grading is not an easy A. It doesn't mean, I can just give myself an A on this assignment and that's what I'll get. You have to be able to really demonstrate how it is that you've earned that A. How have you fulfilled, even exceeded the expectations for that assignment? So it's still a very rigorous process, and it requires sometimes even a little bit more work because the student has to understand really how it is that they are crafting each assignment or assignment category to meet those objectives and outcomes. So that's just a kind of general overview of the collaborative grading process. And the way that I implement it is at the beginning of the semester, I create a Google Drive folder where the student and I will be collaborating all semester long. So I ask students in the early weeks of the class to sort of review the outcomes and objectives for the course, and then I give that to them in a handout, and I also provide a rubric for how those are assessed in each assignment category. And then I ask students to consider what their learning goals are for the semester and for the class, and then they submit those learning goals to the Google Drive folder. Then throughout the semester, every few weeks, I will provide feedback on the assignments that the students are working on. So let's say these are discussion boards or drafts of papers. That will all be occurring in Google Drive. I'll be providing feedback there, and the students will periodically offer self-reflection and self-assessment. Here's how I think that I'm doing. Here's where I'm struggling. Here's where I need more guidance. Here's how I think that I'm working to fulfill some of these objectives and outcomes. Then for each major assignment, students will submit a grade for themselves and a self-reflective piece explaining how it is that they feel they've earned that grade and fulfilled the objectives, outcomes, and learning goals for that assignment. And they also have a midterm and final exam self-reflection. So this is a really involved and ongoing process. It's not something that's done once. And it does involve a lot of collaboration between the professor and student, but ultimately, I believe that this is the best way for grading to become more equitable and really for it to be more student-centered. So I hope that gives you a nice overview of how collaborative grading works. Thanks so much.